GTA 6 might be the biggest commercial entertainment product in history, and to be absolutely certain of this, it's enough to just take a look at the past.
Never has there been an opening like this in the entertainment industry. 3, 2, 1, Grand Theft Auto 5 pulled in $1 billion in sales in 3 days. No movie or music release has ever come close to that.
Which is precisely why I think there's so many things that can go wrong with it. I think, despite its delays, it's still kinda crazy to me that GTA 6 is supposed to come out in just 6 months. Considering they'll stick to the 2 delay rule of the previous games, and we don't get another "Hi everyone" tweet from Rockstar. Like, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around this game being real. I think part of this can be attributed to the fact that from the trailers, screenshots, and everything we've seen so far, this game looks so realized, yet we haven't heard anything at all from Rockstar in more than a year, other than the dreaded tweet announcing its delay, and that was already in like, what, November? But believe it or not, this isn't really my main concern with the game and the reason why I'm making this video. Even though, of course, as many, I am getting a bit concerned with how quiet Rockstar is at the moment, but I want to talk about the problems facing this game when it comes out. In a way, GTA 6 is almost a victim of Rockstar's own success. They spent over a decade building this almost mythic expectation around the game, something that's taken a hold of the culture's zeitgeist to the point where delivering anything less than extraordinary feels like failure. But at the same time, this almost unbelievable expectation stems from Rockstar being able to consistently push the boundaries of what this medium can do. Whether that's through deeply engaging narratives, like they've achieved with Red Dead 2, or through creating expansive, detailed worlds with their own ecosystems, cultures, and sense of time and place. A lot of their concerns I've seen about GTA 6 seem to center around this exact tension, so to speak. That Rockstar's last 2 major releases almost feel like they're pulling in completely different directions. And despite everything Rockstar has shared about the game so far, it's still hard to pin down what the tone of this game is actually going to be like. As this guy, William B. Campbell, puts in his video, if we look at the 2 last major Rockstar releases, GTA 5 is light, satirical, and almost allergic to sincerity, as he describes it, which feels pretty accurate. And on the other hand, Red Dead Redemption 2 is slower, more immersive, and willing to sit with heavier, more introspective themes. That contrast is where things get interesting, I think. The romanticized, almost tactile realism of Rockstar's depiction of the American frontier in Red Dead Redemption 2 works because it's paired with a story that, for the most part, takes itself seriously. One that constantly questions its characters, their morals and values, and the consequences of their actions that trickle down for generations. But when you look at GTA 6, the question becomes a matter of how do you carry over that same level of detail, immersion, and narrative weight into a world that has traditionally been driven by satire, and of all places, doing it in the intended setting for GTA 6. As this comment from that same video I mentioned puts it, the game is set in Florida. How serious could they even make it? GTA 5 leaned heavily into that satire that has progressively become a blueprint for how GTA develops its stories. This game rarely takes anything seriously, with missions that often feel like a string of high-energy action set pieces and pop culture references, and often almost preemptively mocking and pointing out their own cliches.
I'm rich, I'm miserable. Half the time my kids can't stand me, the other half my wife is cheating on me. Hell, I'm pretty average for this town, really.
Story and character development in this game feel quick and to the point, and it often feels like they're doing just enough to push you towards the next shooting section.
Fuck you! Fuck! Joe Phillips! Motherfucker.
And therefore, when 5 does decide to have moments where it reaches for something deeper, they're almost easy to miss. The story and character development often move so quickly that they kinda leave you wanting more, which actually makes revisiting the game interesting, as I have recently. You start to pick up on smaller details, like for instance, there's this moment after the mission Fresh Meat near the middle of the game where Michael tries to explain to Franklin why he turned his back on his whole crew. He tells Franklin how you feel as if you keep running, but you know that at some point your legs just give out, and you will never really be able to escape that life, and how that feeling ultimately lets you end up choosing your own survival.
You took it. Man, you burned every motherfucker you've ever known.
It was that or die. Look, I know it sounds cold. I don't expect you to understand it. Not yet, but you will. When you got ties of your own. Look, you wake up one day and your legs, They just give. You just can't run anymore.
And later on, if you've played all the endings, there's one in particular where that idea quietly comes back in a way that almost feels like an attempt at making a character arc. A nod to a cyclical mirroring that adds more depth that the game lets on at first, and it feels closer to Red Dead in that way. It gives a more realistic outlook about how a life of crime isn't really about glory, but rather survival, and what that forces you to become. Just imagine if they would have dwelled on that idea, or maybe just let it resonate a bit more, just so we could sit with it a little longer. It would have definitely benefited the plot, in my opinion. And overall, it would have provided more symmetry and cohesion to the story.
Hey, Lamar, it's me, homie. And I know I've been kind of caught up in shit, man, but shit been real crazy, homie. You know how it is. You just start running and shit, and all of a sudden your legs give and you just can't run no more.
I think it's why that ending in particular has always stuck with me the most, even if it's obviously one of the most off-putting ones. That, and probably also the fact that it has the best song out of the 3 endings.
Man, just hit me, dog. We brothers, homie, alright?
But the Option C ending, which I guess has now been made the canon ending thanks to the timeline of the online story moving to the present, has always felt a bit too wholesome and not really in a good way.
Now what?
We didn't really get to feel these characters face any sort of repercussions for their actions. And that in itself kills any sense of stakes this game could possibly have. And it kind of makes you feel like you've been duped from actually attempting to care about what happens to these characters. Because why would you? From this ending, we get the message loud and clear that they don't really live in anything that resembles the real world. Which is kind of a shame to me because I've always been personally drawn to narratives that manage to pull off that balancing act of living in a completely cartoony world but also managing to have serious and clear stakes. This is probably the one and only example I'll bring from things that aren't Rockstar, but it's the kind of thing that made something like the first few seasons of The Boys, for example, so damn good. It had silly and funny moments, but they also made the character of Homelander so threatening whenever Huey or Butcher faced him, because he was clearly so much more powerful and he was unpredictable, which is something the last seasons clearly lost sight of, but yeah, you get my point. GTA 5 feels intentionally cartoony and obviously a parody of the modern world, but also nothing matters in this game because nothing's real and there aren't any stakes, which I highly doubt that last part was intentional. Do you think Franklin copped the flying bike on Warstock or not? So if Rockstar doesn't want to fully return to that overall tone of complete satire and have picked up on a thing or two about Red Dead's character development, how do they strike a balance? How do you build a world that feels dense, grounded, and believable, one with layered systems, a strong sense of place, and a narrative that actually has weight? One that really puts us on the character's headspace and lets us see the world from their perspective, a world that's grimy, suffocating, relentless, a fractured ethos shaped by survival, running from your past, chasing something better, compromising morals, getting pulled deeper into things you can't escape, a more grounded human portrayal, one that feels real and understandable, and all of this while still maintaining GTA's identity as a sharp, exaggerated critique of modern America. What if I told you we already know exactly what a GTA game like that looks like? I don't want this to turn into a GTA 4 is a dark and gritty masterpiece video in disguise. I might take a swing at giving my full expanded take on this game later on, but after going back and playing almost every GTA title, along with both Red Dead games, it's hard not to see this specific game as the blueprint for what GTA 6 should aim for thematically. It's no surprise that this game has gotten so much praise recently. Dan Houser, which is, writer and producer of pretty much every major Rockstar title, discussed in this interview the creative process behind making GTA 4 and how this game came to be. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but in short, he talked about how GTA 4 was heavily influenced by his time living in New York, and how that personal experience really helped shape the tone of the game. He, like Niko Bellic, being an immigrant coming into America, gave him a more personal and profound connection with the character. An outsider, trying to understand and navigate a completely new world. That perspective gives the story and the world a different kind of weight.
I was living in New York. I've been living in New York for a few years. Wasn't sure if I was happy. I was going through a lot of personal dramas as usual. And that was why I was looking at some of GTA 4 again recently, and it's really dark. And I was like, oh, that's why. I was single and miserable, and I wasn't sure I wanted to stay in America. And life felt very unsure. And that kind of bled into it, trying to find an underbelly to New York and capture an immigrant experience and then tell it story from a different angle as an immigrant, which I thought made it interesting. And then this sort of journey around these various New York characters.
Because of that, Liberty City feels less of a parody and more like a point of view. It's still satirical, it's still critical, and even though it often also has that goofy GTA humor, it is without a doubt grounded in something more personal. The humor and commentary found in this game aren't just entirely comical. They actually feel like they come from a place of observation, which is what makes the world feel more believable and ultimately, in a way, feel more impactful. I think that's why Niko Bellic works so well as a protagonist. He isn't a larger-than-life character in a way 5's protagonists are, which pretty much serve as archetypes. Just to go back to that point about GTA 5 constantly pointing out its own cliches, playing these games back-to-back has given me this notion that it's kinda hard to shake down, but you can almost reduce the protagonist in 5 down to a single idea. Michael, which to me is the most real and compelling out of the three, can still pretty much be summed up as the archetype of the burned out, middle-aged, nostalgic ex-criminal, dissatisfied and living a life that doesn't fulfill him anymore. Franklin is the ambitious underdog trying to rise above his circumstances, and Trevor,
You are a hipster. What? You're a hipster. I hate hipsters. Classic hipster denial.
as Stephen Ogg himself describes him, is pretty much a caricature.
I'm Stephen Ogg. Trevor is a cartoon, so I did portray him using the magic of motion capture. But I myself could never be a cartoon, ever, because a cartoon is not even real.
And even if that slightly undersells the character, it's not entirely inaccurate, to be fair.
It's cold up here. My cock's an ice pop. Ice cock. Pop cock. Fuck!
Like, I'm sure you've also read some opinions about how Trevor is supposed to represent the overall mindset of the GTA player, in like how Trevor is just a senseless murdering psychopath, but I don't really see it. I think the overall mindset of the GTA player is pretty well represented with the online protagonist, just a mute moron that gets shoved new businesses down their throats just so we can keep up with the job simulator. I went on a tangent, didn't I? But my point with the story mode protagonist is that when you think about Niko Bellic, on the other hand, he just doesn't really fit into a mold that simple. If you try to describe him in one word, it pretty much falls apart, because he's just not really only one checkbox of character traits. Niko is a very conflicted character, shaped by his past, pulled in different directions, a man trying to move forward, all while carrying things he can't let go of, but never really being the chip on his shoulder type of guy. He knows he got dealt a bad hand, but he doesn't really complain. And that complexity is exactly what makes him feel more real to me.
You remember, during the war, we did some bad things. And bad things happened to us. War is where the young and stupid are tricked by the old and bitter into killing each other. I was very young and very angry. Maybe that is no excuse.
It feels more as if he wasn't really built around a concept the way 5's characters are. He feels like an actual person with layers, contradictions, and most importantly, an overall sense of depth, much in the same vein as Arthur Morgan. I still remember the reaction when Red Dead 2 was in a similar stage to where GTA 6 is at now. You know, the marketing phase. And people did not mess with Arthur at first. Everyone was like, who is this square chin looking asshole who's always asking for money?
You got some money for me, boy? I seen your name in our ledger.
And I like how the top comment from this trailer kind of proves my point. It says, remember when everyone hated the idea of playing Arthur Morgan? People wanted John Marston because it was a character we were all familiar with and we already knew and had grown attached to over the years. I don't think anybody at the time could have seen just the absolute beast, the powerhouse of a character Arthur really ended up being, and how deeply players will connect with him over the course of the game. And by the end of it, we weren't ready to leave him behind. Part of this impact, aside from the great writing, which I've mentioned, can also be attributed to Roger Clark's incredible and unprecedented performance. But when you get into this game, you notice also even minor characters are written and performed with such depth and gravitas that every interaction with Arthur feels so meaningful and necessary to get the full picture of his character and his journey.
My husband died a long time ago. Life is full of pain. But there is also love and beauty.
I guess I'm afraid.
There is nothing to be afraid of, Mr. Morgan. Take a gamble that love exists and do a loving act.
This scene in particular was one of those rare instances for me where this genre catches you off guard, just because of how emotionally sincere it feels. And it's kind of a shame that both of these scenes I showed, the whole strand of missions with the Downs family in Annesburg and that scene with Sister Calderon, are completely optional, i.e. completely missable. Because, as I said, they feel so pivotal to Arthur's redemption arc, but at the same time, I kinda respect the decision, you know? Because it's like, if you want this character to redeem himself, you must actually seek for it. And that way, it gives these missions a whole nother layer of the player deepening his connection with Arthur. This game is fucking great. There's no other way to put it. GTA 5 could never. Nobody can really deny the impact that games like 4 and RDR2 had, not only in terms of how these games elevated the standards of what a video game narrative could be, and how immersive, emotional, and alive their worlds really feel, but I think it also demonstrated how deeply this media can resonate with its audience, and in my opinion, it did so in a way only a handful of other games have achieved so far. With the departure of Dan Houser in 2020, GTA 6 feels, at least thematically and narratively, a bit like an orphan, I'm afraid to say. I still want this game to have the most compelling story and characters it can possibly have, but if I'm being honest, and if I were to put money on it, I'm not sure the signs point to it reaching the same level of depth and profoundness that RDR2 had. I think that game will remain their magnus opus when it comes to narrative, especially when you consider that Houser reportedly left the company due to creative differences about where the story of GTA 6 should go. And you know, as a rule of thumb, I always take these rumors with a huge grain of salt, but there have been bits and pieces of information around what Dan Houser's vision for GTA 6 supposedly was. Some reports suggested that an early version of the game leaned toward a more organized crime and cartel-centered story set in the 1980s, which is very similar in time frame to Vice City, but on a much broader scale. The idea was to blend the Miami scene with regions of the Caribbean and Latin America, creating a more interconnected world centered around drug trafficking and organized crime. But I guess with the twist that we will eventually visit these other regions. Now, once again, I'm not saying I wholeheartedly believe these rumors, but it is very interesting how closely that lines up with the leaks surrounding Project Americas, which is the name often associated with Rockstar's early plans for GTA 6. That version of the game was rumored to span multiple locations across the Americas before the studio reportedly scaled down toward a more focused, modern-day version of Florida, which we now know is the retcon state of Leonida. And it was only until early 2021 that we started getting rumors that we would get a female protagonist, and then later found out that it was both a female and a male protagonist, and that they were a couple, and that it was gonna be a more Bonnie and Clyde type of story. And then in 2022 we got the huge leaks, and you know what happened. But from what I can gather, Houser's vision tried to focus on a more human side of organized crime, which I can only imagine being something almost in the vein of The Sopranos.
What's wrong with you? Talk to me. This ain't like you, kid.
And whether or not these rumors are factual, it's an interesting direction, and one that may have aligned procedurally a bit more with what Rockstar achieved in Red Dead Redemption 2, building a strong ensemble of characters and then slowly peeling them back over time. That said, my main issue with this supposed story, and I've mentioned this in other videos, but for GTA specifically, I've always liked how most entries, aside from San Andreas and Vice City, are set in the year they release. Because whether intended or not, they end up functioning almost like time capsules, capturing the themes dominating and defining the culture of their moment. In 4, set in the early 2000s, you see post 9/11 paranoia and conversations around terrorism, have the cities shut down due to terrorism threats for like 1/3 of the game.
Weasel News. Breaking news. Liberty City is gripped by a fresh wave of terror and violence, which many believe is linked to terrorism.
Radio stations dedicated to modern sounds of that era like The Beat, Electroshock, or San Juan would now be considered retro. And probably the most dated thing about this game is that you had to go to internet cafes to go on the in-game web. This game is very 2000s coded, to say the least. And while writing this, I just came to the terrifying realization that more than half of GTA 5's player base might not even know that the internet was a thing that existed on a designated physical space and not a thing that you carry around with you everywhere you go, but yeah, I digress. And then, in 5, it's kind of like the pre-adolescence of the internet and social media. Celebrity culture, and this kind of performative, hypersensitive lifestyle that encapsulates LA at the time. And now in 6, we seem to be moving toward a kind of late stage version of that, where everything is amplified. Consumerism, algorithm-driven identity, constant self-promotion, and that sense of living in a reality that feels increasingly artificial. There is almost no doubt that with the version of GTA 6 Rockstar decided to go with, these underlying themes will serve as the backbone for depicting the culture of this entry. And just to go back to that comparison in perspective, Hauser has explicitly said that setting stories in the modern world can feel too frantic to develop a story as grounded as Red Dead. But I'm not entirely convinced that's the case. You can look at other forms of media and TV shows like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, which are all set in relatively modern day contexts, and see how they manage to tell deeply character-driven stories while still engaging with the world around them. It's shows like this that have always felt like modern westerns to me in that regard. I think it's where GTA 6 becomes really interesting. If it leans into a more serious, immersive story, one that actually prioritizes character development, it could create a stark contrast with its geographical setting and time. A place like Miami, or Rockstar's version of it, is one of the most unique backdrops you could ask for when it comes to satirizing modern America. Because Miami is kind of a perfect representation of that duality I've been talking about. A glossy surface and a much darker undercurrent beneath it. You got the influencers, crypto bros, yachts, nightlife, plastic surgeries, excess and luxury, but also crime, exploitation, cartels, and a stark divide between wealth and poverty. All of that can raise that very interesting question of, could this be the perfect setting to explore the full range of characters and contradictions that define human nature? If you go to Rockstar's website and read the descriptions for both the main characters, Jason and Lucia, it doesn't seem like they're going back to GTA 5's idea of fitting their characters into one archetype in particular. For Jason, his description says that he grew up around grifters and crooks, he served in the army, and that he now lives in the Keys working for local drug runners. And for Lucia, it says that her father taught her to fight as soon as she could walk, and that she's always had a troubled life. And fighting to survive and strive for a good life her family always dreamed of is the thing that drives her the most. Which kinda sounds similar to Nico in that sense, but maybe she'll be less of a stranger to this world. I think both of these descriptions sound detailed enough for me to assume they just won't fit into the character prototype thing, but are also, of course, intentionally kept very vague as well. And also the whole relationship dynamic and whether or not they will stand by each other no matter what, or if maybe there's some sort of betrayal down the line, could actually make for some compelling storytelling if I'm being honest. We know Rockstar has dipped their toes when it comes to writing romantic relationships and have been quite good at them, so I'm not completely opposed to the idea of this game being set in both perspectives of this relationship. The point I'm trying to make is that the tone they have set for this game until now doesn't necessarily turn me off. I think they still have the chance to make a good story with what they've presented so far. And the other characters they've listed sound like a good healthy ensemble of serious characters and others not so serious. That's why I kinda like the comparison of GTA feeling like a slice of life story at times, almost like a Dickens book, where you're dropped into this massive ensemble of eccentric characters from all walks of life, but for that kind of world to really work, the characters, meaning the protagonist, need a little more to go other than filling a cliche for us to genuinely care about moving through their journey on this world. And that's exactly the balance I'm hoping for. Not something that feels entirely caricatured like 5, but as I mentioned, something closer to 4, where the city feels less of a parody and more like a perspective. And honestly, I prefer a lot of 4's mission design because of that, except of course for not having a fucking autosave, because fuck that, man. Or the fact that you have to walk to each item individually when buying clothes, and then it takes ages to load each time. Some of these things could be easy fixes if they were ever to remaster this game, but yeah. On another note, I've always enjoyed the more street level side of GTA. The feeling of existing within the criminal underworld instead of constantly being thrown into massive action set pieces and heists. The heist formula in GTA 5, with all the setups and giant action sequences, which ironically was based after the 3-leaf clover mission from 4, you know, the one where you rob the Bank of Liberty, it honestly starts to feel a bit overdone after a while in 5. Some of my favorite moments in GTA 4 are still tied to much smaller scale jobs. Sure, there's the bank heist mission everybody remembers, but I also love the more street stuff. The missions with Little Jacob, the random jobs, the feeling of Nico just trying to chase that bread and get on his feet, you know? And on the other hand, I gotta say, even missions like Hood Safari or the long stretch in GTA 5 feel this way. And to me, they stand out way more than some of the larger heists, simply because they feel more grounded. And the dialogue stemming from these characters reacting to the world just feels better in comparison to the other missions. It makes me wish we would have actually had more missions with just Franklin and Lamar, which we kinda did get with the only semblance of a story mode DLC this game ever had, in the form of the short trip missions from GTA Online, you know, the ones that you get after completing the contract heist. But it's just kind of a shame that it is so hidden within the online ecosystem that it's pretty much impossible to access for people who do not care at all about GTA Online. And of course, I recommend you watching my video on the downfall of GTA Online if you haven't already, but the repetitive A to B mission structure becomes way more glaring having stayed with the online for more than a decade, stripped away of any character development or narrative or any sort of writing that usually carries these games. And to be fair, I don't think GTA 6 and its story mode component will have this sort of problem because I don't think Jason and Lucia are some mute, expressionless, devoid of personality idiots that get dragged from war criminal operation to another by a bunch of pushy NPCs who somehow convince you to spend millions on warehouses and bunkers and businesses only for you to still do all the work while they call themselves your partners or even your employees.
Nice.
But yeah, it's one of the things that I had in my mind because I really hope they also step it up with the online this time around. They already realized the hard way just how bad that formula can fall on its face if they just carry it from one game to another without even making an attempt to reinvent the game mode. Or at least make use of how vastly different the world they are trying to bring that formula into is. But instead, they just made Red Dead 2 Online a reskin of GTA Online but with cowboys. Tried that for like a year, giving it updates, businesses, cosmetics, microtransactions and whatnot, but it didn't end up working as good as the other cash cow, obviously. So then they just shelved it for good. And that is pretty much how the fourth best selling game of all times doesn't have any single DLC updates. So I really hope they reinvent this game mode for GTA 6. And I'm talking a massive overhaul. The RP elements that are rumored to have been worked on could be a great starting point. And I hope it doesn't just become another cash cow that actually robs us of the possibility of Rockstar expanding this world further in the form of single player DLCs. But I'm aware this is just wishful thinking on my part, and it will most likely be the case that we get another mind-numbingly stupid job simulator instead. Because people keep playing them and buying shark cards. Most of all, I think what concerns me the most about GTA 6 is that 12 years has been enough time for Rockstar to completely lose sight of what made this franchise so special in the first place. But I'd rather remain optimistic that maybe with this amount of time and the huge amount of money the company made in that period, it gives this game just the right tools to evolve into something genuinely new. I think GTA has always survived and reigned over similar types of games because it has always been willing to take the IP into a completely different direction. It has always been willing to change, and because of that, every entry feels so distinct. Which is why people argue endlessly over which one is better, because each game represents a different interpretation of what GTA even is. You get it's gonna be about crime and violence and a lens towards our society, but that perspective has constantly shifted. And that's a good thing. It needs to. Rockstar has already proven they can build immersive worlds better than almost anyone else in the industry. We know GTA 6 is going to have absurd detail, incredible visuals, packed streets, realistic NPC behavior, and a map full of things to do. Hopefully with actual interiors this time around. That's kind of expected now. I would be very surprised if it manages to disappoint in that regard. I don't think it will happen, because it's like that meme that goes like GTA 6 visuals make GTA 5 look like an Xbox 360 game. Yeah, no shit, it'll look better. The real question is whether there's actually something new underneath all of that. That's why I think GTA 6 can't just be more GTA. It can't only be bigger, louder, and more expensive. It has to evolve. It needs to find a way to combine the immersion and detail Rockstar perfected in Red Dead 2 with a more grounded and human approach to storytelling. Something that feels less like a parody, constantly afraid of sincerity, and more like a genuine perspective on modern life. Because to be honest, parody and satire feels kind of flat now that we live in a world as absurd as it is on its own right now. So I think if they just focus on amping up the technical aspect, and they just made a bigger map and bigger action set pieces. They didn't really work on developing a new perspective. Then I'm afraid I'll have to say that GTA is in trouble. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments, and if you like this video, make sure to click on that hype button, which has proven to be a really good feature YouTube's added for helping smaller creators get noticed in a space that can feel pretty impossible to break into. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
So now what?